It's hard to describe in words. I was honored to clerk for Judge Daniel A. Mannion of the Seventh Circuit Court of Appeals. He has since stepped down. He went senior, was appointed by President Reagan in '86, and then went senior in '07, and then just this past year stepped down for good from his service on the bench up to 36 years. He's just an incredible man in every respect. And the thing that I just remember him saying every day, every time I would go to him about anything, where I had some sort of conflict with a family life situation and work, he always would say family first. And that really struck me during my clerkship. And he was always it was interesting because on the one hand he could be very stoic. And so his judicial chambers were we were in South Bend, even though the court was in Chicago. We were in South Bend at the Northern District of Indiana, and his chambers were separate from the clerk's chambers. We had our own chambers. He rarely came over to clerk's chambers, but he would occasionally call us over there. And the day before oral argument in Chicago, we would spend about 6 hours going over the cases for that next day. And that's really where we got to spend time with him and talk with him. So you got to spend a lot of time with him, especially on those oral argument days, which happen, every month. And so he just was incredible, just a very thoughtful judge, hardworking judge, wasn't as flashy as some of the big names on the Seventh Circuit, like Judge Posner and Judge Easterbrook and Judge Wood and a lot of the people that are kind of national names. But he's also known to a lot of people and lawyers and professors in the United States. And so it was just, I just feel honored to have spent that time clerking for him. In terms of my preparation, whenever I'm giving clerkship advice, I tell people you might not want to go overboard like I did. I printed off every opinion and concurrence and dissent that Judge Mannion had ever written up to the point from like '86 to 2001 when I was doing, I'm sorry, up to 2000, I think is right around the time that I interviewed, and read every single one of them. And I'd talked to people who had clerked for him, people that I'd met through kind of networking. So I was pretty familiar by the time that I went in and interviewed with him. And some of the things that were alluded to earlier about, a lot of judges are kind of looking for people that have kind of similar judicial philosophies. Judge Mannion and I have very similar judicial philosophies. And so I think that was helpful. And he also would have somebody actually kind of pre-vet before his interview. I had Professor Bradley at Notre Dame actually did like a pre-vetting, and that's the kind of thing you would learn if there were a database, right? I kind of had to figure that out as I went along, but it was a great experience, the whole internship, interviewing with Professor Bradley, with the clerks, and talking about fit. I will just say this for anybody watching, if you get an interview for a clerkship, they've already determined that you're smart enough. The judge has already determined that you're smart enough to do the clerkship. It really does, I think, become a question of fit and kind of, it's a small community, as Doug was saying. And so it's like, do we want to bring you into our little world? And so when I was interviewing, the funny thing is we talked about all sorts of interesting, complex, esoteric legal issues. But one of the things they said, when the clerks were interviewing me was, what do you do when you're not doing all this law nerd stuff or when you're not practicing law? And I told them some things, and I said, I listed off reading and going to church and spending time with my family and football and all these things. I said, this was in 2000, around 2000, 2001. And I said, I think this was the fall of May of 2000. And I said, you're going to laugh at me, but there's this show called Survivor that I watch, and it's kind of an escape. And the funny thing was, what I didn't know is that these clerks had Survivor watch parties, and so they were excited that I was going to be able to come in. And I think that scored me as much as any like commentary I might have had on the privileges or immunities clause, and that sort of thing. So anyway, that's, it's kind of a funny little anecdote, but it really does go to show you that some of these things you just kind of can't prepare for. And that's why I think it's important when you go into those interviews to be your true self, to be authentic. And because I think, if you're not, and people think you're a fit and you're not, it can end up being, it may not be the best experience that you can have. So there's a lot more I could say, but I'll end with that.